Good morning. Sorry about that. When I was asked to speak this Sunday, I looked at my calendar and I saw it was Father's Day. I tried to give Joel a little out. I was like, oh yeah, Father's Day, huh? Hoping he'd say to himself, like, oh, you're right, I should get somebody who's been a dad more than 3 years, get them to speak. But he didn't, so I'm here. I looked around in first service and everybody had like a lot of years on fathering to me. Looking around here, same thing. Every dad in here has been a dad. Some of you quite a few more years than me, and some of you way more years. So there's not a lot I can give you for advice as a father. In fact, I relish the opportunities that I get from you all to learn. I've seen you guys interact with your children, and I've learned a lot from that, and I've appreciated it. And I work with so many of your kids, and you guys are doing a fantastic job. So thank you for that. I started praying to God. I said, God, show me what you want me to speak on. And over, he brought a verse to my mind that I didn't see anything to do with Father's Day. But I couldn't shake that verse out of my head. The verse was Micah chapter 6, verse 8. If you want to go ahead and turn there, we'll break that down together. God has given me a message that I think applies to dads, but more than anything, it applies to us growing in our character and growing in our relationship with God and growing to follow Him in the way that He desires us to. Micah chapter 6, verse 8. This is a verse that you might know pretty well. It's a verse that's often memorized by people because it's such a good and profound verse. Micah 6:8. It says this: He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. I want to begin breaking this verse down by really especially emphasizing what it does not say. When he says, what does the Lord require of you? It would be easy for somebody to say, oh, this is required for salvation. That is not, in fact, what the verse is trying to say at all. Scripture teaches us that our salvation is a gift from God, that it's not by doing justly, loving mercy, and walking humbly. We don't do anything to earn it. In fact, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8, Paul says this: For by grace you have been saved through faith. And it's not of yourself, but it's a gift of God, not of your own doing, lest anybody should boast. But the Lord does require it. And this is, I think, where it maybe comes into a little bit of a Father's Day message. You don't require anything of your children to be called children. Right? That's their birthright, or maybe you adopted them. But either way, they're your children. God doesn't require that we do something to earn His favor. He doesn't require that we do anything to become His children, other than believe. Just accept it and we are His children. It's by faith you have been saved, not by doing. And yet, my guess is, you have some rules, some requirements for your children. Even though their failure or success in those rules doesn't determine whether they're still your children or not. Because you love them greatly and they'll always be your children. In the same way, God does have some requirements, some rules that He expects of us. Something He expects us to do. And those rules exist for the same reason that your rules exist, by the way. Because He wants the best for you. Because He wants you to grow up to be mature. To be able to handle the world. To be able to be successful in all that you do and say. And so, the verse starts out, what does the Lord require of you? Here's what He requires of you. Firstly, to do justly. To do justice. As I started studying this verse, I thought about another way you could have written the verse that I think would have had far less potency. There's three things, right? Justice, mercy, and humility. You could have said, what does the Lord require of you? He requires justice, mercy, and humility. The end. But those qualifiers, those action verbs, I think say just as much about what you ought to do and what the Lord expects of you as the action itself. Let me show you why. God is a God of mercy and a God of justice, right? So it could have said it so simply like that. But instead he says this. He says, do justly. Why not just interchange those? Could they be interchanged? Maybe you'd say, do mercy, give mercy, and love justice. Here's the deal. I think we tend to love justice kind of automatically. We tend to like justice just as a nature of being human. See, loving justice is natural to our existence. Call it what you may. Scripture calls it reaping what we sow. The world tends right now to take a more Buddhist approach and say karma. Karma is very popular today. An older term that some of you might know or have heard of, comeuppance. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. Am I pronouncing that right? Comeuppance? A dose of your own medicine, getting what's coming to you, or your just desserts. Whatever you call it, we like justice. If somebody cuts you off in traffic, how wonderful to see that I got pulled over a half a mile down the road. We love justice, and so God doesn't need us to call us to love justice. We love justice especially, by the way, when it doesn't apply to us. And so he doesn't say, you need to love justice. You need to love when people get what they deserve. No, God calls us to a higher standard. He says, justice, I want you to do it. You're going to love mercy. I want you to love mercy, but I want you to do justice. And so he says, what does the Lord require of you? He says, do justly. Do justly. When justice is applied to others, just search YouTube for instant karma videos. Oh man, tons of videos of people doing things that they ought not. And then something happening to them. People love it. People love it. The internet is filled with them. But doing justice is hard. By the way, doing justice is going to cost you. It's going to be expensive. Whether it's financially, mentally, emotionally, it's going to cost to do justice. Because doing justice requires you to do the right thing. Even if it's costly. In fact, I'd say especially if it's costly. Doing justice for David after he made a mistake with Bathsheba. Slept with Bathsheba, she got pregnant. Doing justice, David should have said, I am so sorry. I took what wasn't mine. And God would have wanted that of him. God does require that of him. But David said, no, justice is too hard. It would be easier if I tricked him. And so if you know the story, David tries to trick him. Go spend the night with your wife, thinking that maybe he'll later, after he gets back from war later, he'll think it is his kid. Doing justice was too hard. And then, of course, that goes on, it devolves, and it gets to the point where he says, well, I won't kill him, but if I send him to the front line and tell everybody else to back up, someone else will kill him. Problem solved. David, that's not doing justice. Doing justice would have cost David, and it would have cost him greatly. It would have cost him greatly for him to be humiliated in front of his people, for him to be humiliated in front of this woman's husband. But justice is what the Lord requires of us. Justice, doing it, is costly, because justice applied to you is costly. But God calls us not just to justice, mercy, and humility. He calls us to do justice. He says, what do I require of you? Do justly. In Matthew chapter 5, Jesus takes just living to another level. Matthew 5:38, he says, you've heard it said that an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, right? You've heard about justice. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, do what? Turn your left to them. If somebody sues you for your cloak, give them your coat. You've heard justice. You've heard about an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. You've heard what's right in this world, and I bet you even love it. He says, I'm not calling you to that kind of justice. I'm not calling you to love for people to get what they deserve. He says, I'm calling you to a justice that's better. Justice that puts the inequality in this world onto your shoulders. If somebody slaps you, turn your cheek. If somebody sues you, give them more. If somebody wrongs you, do them right. Justice when applied to you, when applied to me, is very, very costly. So could it have just said justice, mercy, and humility? It could have, but I don't think that's the point that God was trying to make. Jesus says if there's a justice to incur, let it fall on us. Doing justice God's way will be costly. If you want your children to know, dads, how sold you are out to Jesus Christ, do what is right, especially when it's hardest. They'll know that your commitment goes all the way to your core. Nextly, what does the Lord require of you? He requires that you love mercy. Don't just do mercy. Once again, I think doing mercy, if you said do justice, do mercy, giving mercy, I think tends to come maybe a little harder than loving justice. That's so natural to us. But doing mercy, you've been taught since you were a little child. Your parents say you're sorry, kiss, hug, make up, right? Ever since you were a little kid, you've been taught to do mercy, even when you didn't feel like mercy was what ought to be given. Even when you don't want to, against your own will, you've been taught to give mercy. Think about the being cut on traffic analogy again. It'd be very easy to simply give mercy in that moment, because not giving mercy, doing what you actually feel like you want to do, if you're like me, putting the person into the guardrail, that has consequences. So it's easy to not do something like that because you know that you're the one going to get pulled over if you put them into the guardrail. You're the one who's going to have consequences if you start in some kind of weird battle of flashing your high beams and tailgating, and you know that those things escalate. And so it's easy to give mercy because to operate in a civilized world, mercy is required of you. But God doesn't call us just to give mercy. In Micah 6:8, he says, I don't want you just to give it. I want you to love it. I want you to give your mercy with joy. Even though somebody might deserve to be in some kind of weird road rage battle, I want you to enjoy that you get to give them mercy. I thought of Jacob and Esau. Turn with me to Genesis chapter 27. Genesis 27. Jacob and Esau, two brothers, they were at odds with each other, Scripture says, since the very beginning. In fact, even at their birth, they were at odds with each other. They didn't get along. Genesis 27, verse 41. Genesis 27:41. This is right after Jacob, if you know this story, Jacob steals Esau's birthright. If you want to learn more about that, you can read the chapters before that and the chapters after. He takes his birthright, he takes his father's blessing. Jacob's the younger brother, they're twins, but he's the younger brother, and so he wasn't supposed to get that blessing. But his mom liked him better because there's some dysfunctional parenting there. And so she helps Jacob to trick their father, who's now blind, puts hair on his arms because his brother Esau was a hairy man, and he gives his blessing to the wrong son. Here's Esau's response to that. Genesis 27:41. From that time on, Esau, what? Hated Jacob, because their father had given Jacob his blessing. And Esau began to scheme. I will soon be mourning my father's death, and then I will kill my brother Jacob. He starts to scheme, he starts to plan. He says, your daddy isn't going to be here to protect you forever, Jacob. Oh, when that day comes. I can't do it now. Dad would be upset. I have to give mercy for now. I have to do it for now because Dad would get so upset if I killed you. But that won't always be. What holds me back and what forces me to give mercy now will go away someday. And then I will kill you, Jacob. I want to drop down to chapter 33. What happens in Genesis 28 to 32 is a well-known story. Jacob goes, he runs away, obviously, he's afraid of his brother. He runs away to a foreign land, and he meets this man, his uncle actually, Uncle Laban. and he falls in love with Laban's youngest daughter, Rachel, and he asks for permission to marry Rachel, and he works for him for 7 years to earn that. Uncle tricks him, gives him Leah instead, but says, if you'll work for me for 7 more years, I'll give you Rachel then. So we're up to 14 years that he's been gone. And then at the end of the 14 years, Laban says to him, under your control, under your work, God has given me great blessings on your behalf. All of my goats, they've multiplied like crazy. I've never seen anything like it. What can I give you to get you to keep working for me now? He's out of daughters to give away. So he says, I'll work for you in exchange for sheep, all the spotted ones and speckled goats. All the spotted and speckled goats, you give those to me, and I'll keep raising my goats and your goats together. As a result, God blesses Jacob. He gives him more and more, because remember, his father gave him his blessing. And it's the line of Jesus Christ goes through this. And since it's the line of Jesus Christ going through Jacob, we don't have Esau's story recorded in there. What was Esau doing during those 14 plus years? I have no idea. It's not written down. But I can tell you, Esau went through something. Drop down to Genesis chapter 33 with me. Esau went through some experience, and I think God taught him something huge during those years. Genesis 33, verse 1. Then, this is when Jacob finally left Laban, and he's heading home, and he gets almost home, and he starts to say to himself, this is going to be bad. I left him, he was plotting to kill me. Surely by now my dad's dead. There's nothing holding him back. He doesn't have to give me mercy anymore. So he starts to think to himself, maybe I should send a gift ahead of me. Send him some of these goats that God's given me such great blessings. My father gave me my blessing that I stole from my brother, and that blessing has paid off. He's now very wealthy, with 2 wives and 2 servant wives on top of that, tons of children, and more goats than he can possibly ever use. He's very, very wealthy. And he says to himself, oh, if my brother's still as mad as he was when I left, maybe I should take some of the blessing God's given me, the blessing that I stole, I'll pay him back. So he sends a gift, some treasures, some goats, some of his wealth. He says, bring the goats, bring them to my brother first. Then he says, send the servants and my children ahead of me. Maybe he'll see these children and he'll have a softer heart. Oh, then send Leah. And finally, Jacob and Esau. Let's read this. Genesis 33, Jacob and Rachel, sorry. Genesis 33, verse 1. Jacob looked up and he saw Esau coming with his 400 men. Probably a moment of literally panic. 400 men attending his brother. And he's with women and children. Probably some men too, but 400 men. He divided the children among Leah and Rachel and his 2 servant wives. He put the servant wives and their children at the front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. Then Jacob went on ahead. As he approached his brother, he bowed to the ground 7 times before he met him. Then Esau ran to meet him, and he embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck, and he kissed him, and they both wept. And Esau looked at the women and the children and asked, who are these people with you? These are the children that God has graciously given to me, your servant, Jacob replied. Then the servant wives came forward with their children and bowed before him. Next came Leah with her children, and they bowed before him. Finally, Joseph and Rachel came forward and bowed before him. And what were all the flocks and herds that I met as I came? Esau asked. Jacob replied, they're a gift for my Lord to ensure your friendship. I'm looking to buy back the wrong that I did you. I want to pay you back for that. And so that's a gift to you. Esau answered, my brother, I have plenty. Keep what you have for yourself. But Jacob insisted, no, if I have found favor with you, please accept my gift from me. And get this, this is so huge. I think this shows the change that Esau underwent during those 14 plus years. What a relief to see your friendly smile. It is like seeing the face of God. Please take this gift I have brought you, for God has been very gracious to me. I have more than enough. And because Jacob insisted, Esau finally accepted the gift. I can't tell you the story that happened in Esau because it's not recorded. But something happened. He went from giving mercy because he had no other choice, waiting for the day when he could finally get even. All that went away. At this point, he had learned to love mercy. What encounter did he have with God? What did God do? What did God show him? I don't know. But he learned to love mercy. And this mercy wasn't given out of a requirement. It wasn't given because he had no other choice. It wasn't given because his dad would come down hard on him. This mercy, it wasn't even given because Jacob gave gifts. No, this mercy was given because he loved mercy. Because he loved his brother and he loved to give mercy. Something happened to Esau during those years. So the people say to Micah, what does Yahweh require of us? Do justly, love mercy. When you do justly, your children get to see you're truly committed. When you love mercy, they get to see the face of God. And finally, he says, walk humbly with your God. Again, the word I want to focus on is the walk. Our last part of this verse says, what does God require? But to walk humbly with him. Like the first 2 points, you could just say humility. But I think God chose walk carefully for a reason. God doesn't tell the reader to just be humble or do humble things. He sharpens it with this action verb. Amos chapter 3, verse 3, God says to Israel, when I go left, you go right. When I go up, you go down. When you go north and I'm going south, you aren't walking with me. You don't go the direction I go. And so in Amos 3:3, God says it's an accusation to Israel. Can two people walk together without agreeing on the direction? If they don't agree on where they're going, can they truly walk together? God's point being, no. You aren't going where I'm going, God says to the people of Israel. And likewise, when God says to walk humbly with him, if you aren't agreed on the direction, if you aren't willing to go where God is going, God isn't going to choose to go where you're going. If you aren't going where he's going, you aren't walking together. You can have all the humility in the world. Like Paul says, you can have all the love in the world, all the wisdom in the world, but if you don't have love, you're a clanging gong. You can have all the humility in the world, but if you aren't submitting to God, you're going the wrong direction. God says, I don't just want humility. I want something deeper. I want something more. I want you to walk with me in humility. How can two walk together unless they be agreed? Jesus puts it very simply in John 14, verse 15. If you love me, you will keep my commands. Walking humbly implies a couple things. One, it implies that it's ongoing. That you're not just accepting as an ascension, saying, I agree to these terms. No, the walking is ongoing. Not just agreeing to follow God in the beginning, but truly walking along with him. It also implies that we're united in purpose. That we take the things that are important to him and we make them important to us. When God told Amos to write that passage about walking together, he wrote it as a charge against Israel because they weren't walking. And God expects us to walk with him, to walk in the same direction he's going. I want to close with a final application for dads, like I've already said. Doing justly. The substance of your character will say to your kids that you follow God, especially when it costs you a lot. Loving mercy, seeing your smiling face, even in the face of injustice to you, will be a glimpse of the smiling face of God. Your children will get to see God inside of you as a reflection. And finally, walking humbly. The direction you walk will teach your children where they ought to go as well. Paul tells us this. He says, follow me as I follow Christ. And you can say the same to your children if you're walking humbly with your God. Follow me as I follow Christ. I challenge you with that this morning, and I challenge myself with that this morning. If I do these three things, I think I'm going to be a great dad. If I fail to do these things, I think I'll be every bit as mediocre as I tend to be in everything when I don't follow the Lord. Thank you. Norm, would you come close us with music and a prayer?
Okay, let's stand again. And if you want to sing, you know what to do. God that never fails will not fail me now. He won't fail me now. No way. That same God who's never late is working all things out. He's working all things out. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Oh yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Oh yes, I will. God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now. No way. The same God who's never late is working all things out. Working all things out. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Oh yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Oh yes, I will for all my days. Oh yes, I will, 'cause I choose to pray. Glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against. I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Oh yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Oh yes, I will for all my days. Oh yes, I will for all my days. Oh yes, I will. Oh God, for all our days, that we would do justly, we would love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. Father, empower us to do that. May we honor you, God, with that this week. Keep us close to you, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. God bless you guys. Have a great Lord's Day, Father's Day. Spoil those guys.
Yeah, I found it a long